Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Good evening, Mayor, Council, members of staff, and all those attending in person and online. I'd like to call this May 21st, 2024 meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. I am hearing an echo out of my own laptop. That is interesting. Yeah, maybe you think so. Sorry, just volume. Right on. Got it. Sorry about that. I'll continue. As is our practice, I will be chairing the Committee of the Whole according to the established schedule, which allows all councillors an opportunity to take on, to sit in this role. So I just thank you in advance tonight for your patience and understanding for any slip-ups or awkward pauses along the way. Let us begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is in the traditional territory of the Coast and Strait Salish peoples. Specifically, we recognize the Lekwungen peoples, known today as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections to these lands continue to this day. And I would just like to add that the abundance of purple camas in our parks and our open spaces at this time of year is a daily reminder to me, for sure, of the rich history of our local First Nations. Our next item is the approval of the agenda. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Braithwaite, seconded by Councillor Appleton. I don't expect any discussion, but any discussion? No? All right. And a motion to approve. And I'm sorry, a vote for, sorry, call the question. Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Adopted. Next, we have adoption of the minutes for the 4 meetings of the Committee of the Whole that were held in March 2024. I think we could accomplish this in a single motion. So again, may I have a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Braithwaite, seconded Councillor Appleton. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next on our agenda tonight, item 4, are 2 scheduled delegations. This portion of our agenda is not subject to public input, but there will be an opportunity for council members to ask any questions of our speakers at the end of their presentations, and each delegation is limited to 5 minutes. So our first delegate, our presenter, is Ms. Robin Webb of BC Hydro, who is joining us online. And so I'd like to welcome you, Ms. Webb. If you could just begin your presentation just by telling us your name again and your affiliation, just for the official record, and then you're free to begin. And I'll just make sure that we can hear you. I've got our technical support at the back, just is going to make sure that you get in. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. My name is Robin Webb, and I am the manager of local government climate action at BC Hydro. And I'm guessing that you guys want me to share my screen and bring up my slides. So just 1 second as I get those up. Is everyone able to see the slides now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Ms. Webb.
Okay, perfect. Well, again, yeah, thank you so much, Mayor and Council, for having us here tonight. I also have a colleague in the audience with you there in person today, whose name is Ted Olenek, and he's the Community Relations Manager for Vancouver. And so the two of us might tag team some of your questions afterwards. But yeah, thank you for giving us the time. Our presentation is entitled Power Pathway Building BC Expansion.
Ms. Webb, it's Councillor Watson here. We're missing your voice is coming in kind of distorted and fuzzy. We're wondering if you can adjust your sound settings or maybe move closer to your mic.
Is that any better at all? Test.
Not really.
No.
Try again.
Just give me 1 second. I have some problems with my headphones earlier today, so I apologize for that. Just give me. I'm going to do the stop sharing to be able to see it. I'm wondering maybe if the the second presentation can go, and I'll see if I can go borrow another headset from my husband. Okay.
Can we just take a pause for a second? We'll see if we can do anything about bringing this sound in or maybe getting you to rejoin the call. We'll just take a pause. Okay.
Ms. Webb, do you have a headset or anything you'd be able to plug into your computer?
Yeah, sorry, that's what I had just asked, if I could go run and see if I could get one from my partner. Or is this any better? I switched microphones in the settings, or is this, you're still not able to hear me?
I think a headset would be better, and what we might be able to do, if everyone agrees here, if my co-councillors agree, is we might just switch the order of the presentations, and while you're doing that, we can invite the second set of delegates up to make their presentation. So just relax, take a pause, and we'll come back to you in about 5 minutes. Thank you so much. And so with that, I would actually like to invite up to the speaker's podium our second set of delegates, Ms. Robin Webb, sorry, what am I talking about? Ms. Reza Fournette and Ms. Carmen LeBlanc from Fortis BC. And so just, you know the drill, if you could just introduce yourself, and you will have 5 minutes to give us your remarks. Thank you.
Great, how's that? Yeah, good, thank you so much. Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Thank you for having me. My name is Carmen. I work with Fortis BC. Happy to work with them in community and Indigenous relations capacity and be the connection point between mayors and councils, our customers, community, and all things that are Fortis BC. I think this is really great tonight that we're having this conversation with both the utilities, the major utilities in the province, BC Hydro and Fortis. I think some of you were able to join us at AVICC in April at a panel session where Senior Vice President from Hydro and a Vice President from Fortis BC sat together and talked about the future of energy in BC. You know, some of the things that were shared is that we're in a time of collaboration and partnership and work. And it's not a time of combativeness and divisiveness. And they spoke to the powers that we have today. Oak Bay and the rest of the, large parts of the rest of the province benefit from two very robust energy delivery systems, our gas and our electric system. And they spoke to how they work together to support, you know, homes, businesses, industry, transportation in our communities, and that it's incumbent on all of us to work together to find these solutions to reduce our emissions and to power our communities to be a better BC. You know, I've heard some great words in this council, you know, that this isn't time for being petty. This is like an onion with many, many layers. The road to net zero, it would be very nice if it was a nice, clean path, but it's a complicated journey that will take all of us. So in thinking about a presentation tonight, I feel like we've been through this a number of times. I just want to make sure that you all know that my commitment to you is here, right? You've got a lot of, this is a big decision in how we're going to impact the way energy is delivered to and used in your community. And my commitment remains, Fortis's commitment remains to you to be here to answer the questions that we can on your behalf. What is Fortis in your community? What are we committed and demonstrating in our commitment to emissions reduction and making sure that the energy Oak Bay and BC needs is there when you need it most. And so thinking like about tonight and how do I support this next step in your journey to understanding where Oak Bay is in your implementation of the Zero Carbon Step Code, I was like, there's, I think, 3 big things. Number one, this isn't, we're not in a if or situation, we're in an and, right? The road to net zero is going to take all of us and all of the energy, all of the low carbon energy. We don't have enough of it. So how do we use less energy? How do we find more low carbon energy? And then how do we match energy, the best energy with the best use? And the gas system, I think, is the baby not to be thrown out with the gas or the water. And I just wanted to share with you that we have a really great example here in the CRD. Gas, an in-ground gas system, is delivered gas to communities here in the CRD since 1860. And we see lots, in slides and conversations about the energy transition. That's nothing new. Since 1860, that gas system has been evolving, and the energy it delivers has changed from coal gas, or gas derived from coal, to butane, to natural gas. And next year, we're going to have renewable natural gas captured and delivered from Heartland Landfill. And those, that's an evolution of the system. It's nothing new. We've got a lot of work to do to deliver more and more, to partner and find more opportunities for renewable natural gas. And that's what FortisBC is committed to doing. BC Hydro has a beautiful call for power. The reality is we need more low carbon energy made from hydro, solar, wind. Our role in the gas system is how do we decarbonize that gas? How do we find more low carbon energy to deliver in that system? I think the second thing that I think you should think about tonight, I hear this council asking really good questions. The Zero Carbon Step Code, when the province gave that tool to local governments, they also gave you a timeline with that tool. And so my question to you is, why? Why did they set a timeline, a graduated implementation to EL4, 5 and 6 years from now? Why did they set out that timeline? I think that's an important question for you to ask of the province. And then as we look, I hear the call for regional consistency. And so what are the cumulative effects? It's great that you have Hydro here to talk about that. And I think FortisBC needs to be part of that conversation too. What are the cumulative effects on the capacity and infrastructure in our communities as we commit in a faster way to the higher levels of the Zero Carbon Step Code? And then I really just want you to know that FortisBC demonstrates every day that we are committed to the same things that you are. Before climate emergencies were declared, FortisBC was the first utility in North America to bring a low carbon gas available to our customers. So we are committed to reducing emissions. We're committed to helping our customers use less energy. And we're with you in the road to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. LeBlanc. Now I'll turn to my councillor colleagues and ask them if they would have any questions of you. Yes, Councillor Smart, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, to our presenter today, thank you so much for your time and your very focused presentation. I just wanted to clarify, because I could not recall the statistics from that amazing panel discussion at AVIC. What was the percentage of the whole renewable natural gas supply that Heartland's going to be able to contribute to? Does that make sense?
I should know this. I read it the other day. The CRD's website, if you visit there, they have a page on Heartland and it gives you a very clear, the projected. CRD is building and will own and operate the facility there, but they have really great projections there. It's like 350,000 homes. And I'm happy I'll follow up and get you that number from Heartland. Yeah.
Anybody else at the council table with questions for Ms. LeBlanc? Yes, please go ahead, Mayor.
I just, to follow up to Councillor Smart's, which was the question I was going to ask, but maybe do you have a sense of, do you know what the projection for Fortis is across the province in terms of its RNG capacity in some sort of, at least maybe in the next 5, 10, 15 years, what the expectations are of finding some other sources of renewable natural gas?
Yeah, it as technology innovates, we have increasing access to different biogenic sources of gas. So traditionally it had been landfill and organics. Increasingly, we're seeing the capacity to wood waste or biomass being available. So we did a report, and I think I've shared this with council. I'm happy to send it again, that looked at the province-wide capacity for renewable natural gas, and that takes They looked at renewable natural gas and also low carbon gases like hydrogen. And that's the beautiful thing of a system, is that we figure out the pipes are pretty agnostic to what gas flows through it. So it's just how do the equipment at the end, how are they able to use it? So the study showed, I think, that there's about 4 times our current throughput available in the province of renewable natural gas and low carbon gases like hydrogen. And so we're working to understand how can that be used in our system, either in our collective system or in isolated, maybe isolated hydrogen systems, and or how can hydrogen or low carbon gases be blended into our system. So that initial study showed a very big volume of potential. Our job is to partner and find, right, local governments like yours that manage wastewater treatment, curbside organics, wastewater treatment is a big one, is to partner and identify those sources, and then where they are in proximity to our system, to make them available. FortisBC doesn't own or manage that waste, but, we have to connect with the people who do.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. And for a follow-up to that, is Fortis the default manager of hydrogen infrastructure then for BC? Is that automatic, or is it, has that been essentially established? Because I know it's a fairly new, consideration of an expanded hydrogen infrastructure.
Yeah, I'm certainly not
There.
an expert in hydrogen, and I understand, there are different uses for hydrogen. So there's hydrogen for transportation. There are hydrogen where they're looking at how you put a hydrogen facility in proximity to a high energy use, like industrial application. And I understand that there's some testing going on there. Alberta has some more residential, like a blended hydrogen. So in that situation, FortisBC, and there's another utility in northern BC, but generally hydrogen or FortisBC delivers gas to homes here. So that would be our system. But that's testing, right? We have to figure out what's the blend of hydrogen that could go into that system of the future. So I think it's a combination: use for transportation, use for heavy industry, and then what role does it play in our general distribution system?
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you. I see more hands. Councillor Patterson, you'd be next.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to our guest. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just wondering that with the particularly larger urban centers transitioning or having a strong desire to transition to net zero emissions, but it perhaps being more difficult for some of the smaller communities because of the reliance on fossil fuels. I'm wondering if there has been any assessment done on the shift and the impact of that to smaller communities who are more reliant on fossil fuels if the large urban centers, in fact, transition away from it. And so I'm just wondering if the costs of transmission and service to those customers will increase disproportionately.
Certainly the power of our robust electric and gas systems are because they are so big, right? The cost of our system is shared by our customer base, and so the bigger and more robust the system, that cost is shared amongst our customers. Has a study been done to if the capillaries of the gas system reduce to main arteries? I haven't seen that cost analysis done to how would it impact costs, but if we only delivered energy to a fraction of the users, I'm not sure what the impact would be. And I think it's not even necessarily small communities versus large, right? It just depends where the system is. We have small communities on Vancouver Island that are not connected to the gas system, and they're also not reliant on electricity for energy. They're reliant on other sources of energy as well.
Thank you. I saw Councillor Smart with her hand up again. Anybody else first-time questioners? Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just in the follow-up of the conversation with the questions from Mayor Murdoch, I did want to ask, with your expertise, about hydrogen gas working in our existing infrastructure for natural gas, because I had read quite a few articles saying that wouldn't be possible with how leaky the hydrogen gas can be. And so I just wanted to clarify, because I'm sure you have that answer for us. Could you actually use hydrogen gas in the existing natural gas infrastructure that we have?
Yes, and like I said, it's not my specialty. Do community relations, but happy to connect you with our low carbon gas team. And I do understand that there are isolated systems that they are testing, I think, in northern Alberta, and they have been shown to be able to blend hydrogen into the gas system. But I'm happy to connect you with our team that works in hydrogen for sure.
Through you, Chair, can I just clarify then? So it wouldn't actually be pure hydrogen gas, it would be a blend of with some hydrogen gas mixed in with natural gas?
Yeah, that's my understanding, yes. In our general distribution system, and or then isolated, full hydrogen systems in maybe a large scale industrial facility that can use it directly.
Thank you, Ms. LeBlanc. I don't see any more questions, so we'll conclude this portion of our delegations, and I do thank you again for coming. I just noticed that I see your colleague maybe who's joined online, and she was maybe expecting, was she expecting to say something too? All right, okay, thank you. Oh. Right, right. So yeah, okay, right, okay. Thank you, Reza. This isn't subject to public input, but so she's just joining because she's curious maybe about what your involvement. All right, thank you. So at this point, then I will go back to Ms. Robin Webb and invite her again to the podium, and hopefully the sound's working. So welcome back, Ms. Webb.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Am I coming through a little bit more clearly now?
That is a bit of an improvement. Let's just proceed.
Let's see. Is this any better? If I
Yes, way better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, just let me get my slide deck up here. And again, sorry, I've not had this this problem. So thanks for bearing with me on this. All right. Are you able to see the slide deck now?
Yes, it's coming up, and you just need to move that to full screen.
Perfect. Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for bearing with me. My name is Robin Webb, and I'm the manager of local government climate action with BC Hydro. My colleague Ted Olenek is also in the audience with you today to help answer some questions after our presentation. So our presentation's entitled Power Pathway: Building BC's Energy Future. As our previous presenter discussed, we're all quite aware that we're in the midst of an energy transition here in BC as residents look to switch away from fossil fuels to cleaner sources of power. This really has resulted in an unprecedented level of interest and demand on our electricity system. But also, we're in a very fortunate situation here in BC that we have one of the cleanest electricity systems in the world. So again, we're well positioned to lead on that energy transition. So when we look at BC Hydro's integrated resource plan, so this is our plan for what additional electricity load growth will look like in the future and how we will plan to meet that future demand. Our plan is designed to be flexible, so it prepares us for high and low load growth scenarios. We call those accelerated electrification, and then also to prepare for economic downturns. However, what we're seeing today is there's been really strong economic recovery following the pandemic, but also adoption of new technologies like EVs and heat pumps has been really strong in BC, as well as new legislation and policy from different levels of government, like the Zero Carbon Step Code, have all resulted really in that strong demand for electricity. And so BC Hydro is doing various things to plan for this future demand. So the first thing that we're doing is we'll be bringing Site C online by the end of next year. And when it's up and running, Site C will provide BC with enough power for nearly 500,000 homes or 1.7 million electric vehicles per year. After Site C comes online, our next initiative, and again, this was foreshadowed by our previous speaker, is we, about a month ago, launched a call for power. So this is a competitive process where we're looking for new sources of renewable electricity, and we're looking to add about 3,000 gigawatt hours per year of clean and renewable electricity through this first call, which is enough for about 270,000 homes. a key objective of our call for power is a requirement that all of these new projects that bid into this competitive process actually include a component of Indigenous ownership. And while this first call is, officially announced and out there in the market, we are anticipating that there will be a series of these calls for power in the future. So, next slide. Another really large piece of the puzzle in terms of how we plan to support increased building and transportation electrification in BC is through our capital plan. So this, our most recent capital plan, which is a 10-year forecasting out, is $36 billion worth of investment in community and regional scale infrastructure across BC. And I would like to point out that this is about a 50% increase in investments from our previous capital plans. So again, this is the answering, what are we doing to ensure that the grid is ready for electrification? That being said, new generation isn't the only way that we're planning to meet future demand. We will continue to invest heavily in energy efficiency like we've done in the past 3 decades. So again, encouraging customers to be power smart. There are programs, or rebates and rewards, and we're now also looking to expand some of the offerings to customers in the market and look how we can further support them. So some of the things that we have in development are some incentive programs to support customer adoption of small-scale solar and battery rooftop systems that will help us to manage capacity. We're also going to be introducing things like new voluntary rate structures. So in June, we'll be announcing a new time varying rate or an optional residential time of use rate that aims to incentivize customers to shift some of their demand, in particular for electric vehicle charging, outside of peak demand times, and we'll give them a little bit of an incentive to do so. I just wanted to speak to a couple of our challenges and things that we're trying to do also to support building electrification. One of these relates to grid extensions or the distribution extension policy, which sets out the fee structure for how new connections are charged. So we are taking this policy to the BCUC, and we're looking to try to make it more equitable and more predictable for the building community so that those connection charges, right now they're based more on cost causation, and they can vary quite a bit across different buildings. The next challenge that we're really trying to address is around customer connections and some of the timelines for those. So we realize that it is taking us a little bit longer than it should to get to some of the applications that are in our design queue. So we've just scaled up. We've hired 50 new positions to join our design team of 250 people. We're improving some of our intake processes. We're creating specialized teams, but we're also providing better guidance to the building community through bchydro.com.
Ms.
So,
Webb, oh, good. I see is that perhaps your last slide? I was just watching my clock here, and your 5 minutes has passed, but if you could.
Sorry.
Yeah, it looks like you're wrapping up, so thanks.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Mayor and Council have been invited to an event by BC Hydro in early July where you'll get a much more expanded version of a lot of the content that I've delivered here today. So we hope that some of you can make that, and it'll also give you a chance to interact with our broader team at Hydro, and it will be led by our executives. So we hope that some of you are also able to attend that and have some of your additional questions answered by them as well.
Thank you very much. And now I will turn to Council, Mayor and Council, and ask if there are any questions for you. Mayor, you're first on the list here.
Through you, Chair. I certainly have heard quite a lot of concern about the timelines. I'm glad to see it on for connections. I'm just curious, through you, Chair, if BC Hydro has sort of current and target metrics for some of those timelines from whatever their kickoff measure would be, if the first request or if it's a finalizing of all pieces, but just some sense of where we're at and where we're trying to get to and what that timeline might look like.
You know what? I'm going to have to follow up with our customer connections team on that one because there are two different processes for connections too. So for smaller buildings, there's more of sort of an express connect process. And then for larger, more complex designs that require the work of our designer. But I can definitely follow up and let you know again, yeah, what our metrics are and what we're trying to drive towards so that we can report back on some of that change. Ted, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
Sure, thanks. Just to add, we have hired more designers like everybody in industry and every place. It's a question of supply and finding the right people and getting things to happen. And what we're doing as well is we're working closely with Victoria and Saanich, where the biggest growth is happening right now for us, as a pilot to, it's a kind of key account team working together to try and speed things up. Where are the blockages? What are the impasses that we're creating that's not going to move things along faster? And where are the impasses that are happening within the municipal government that can speed things along for us? I mean, we try to communicate. We're not a developer. We're not a private industry. People don't have a choice of where they want to get their electricity from. We're not a Costco. We can decide where we're going to go for the lowest and best place to be where there's incentive. We're going to be where the people are because that's our mandate. So we want to be seen as a partner with local government, not a developer, not a third party. We're a partner in providing service to the residents of every community.
Councillor Braithwaite, I see you next, and then Councillor Smart. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and through you, Chair. My question kind of goes along with the mayor's in that you said you had hired 50 new people for the teams right now, but with the provincial mandate coming down, is that going to be enough? And is there going to be an issue in the near future of that there's going to be such a backlog of connections that we're going to need because of the increase in housing that's coming down the pipeline? Do you have any predictions on that?
I don't on the numbers side, but I'm going to share some news about an initiative we've been working on internally. We have a gentle density working group within BC Hydro that is made up of various groups throughout the local government, but we also have a City of Vancouver staff person that's embedded at BC Hydro 1 day a week that's helping us with this initiative, looking at the advice that we can provide to the development community around electrical service connections for multiplexes, just because it does represent a fairly big change for us in how we service these new types of developments in a lot of communities. So we're actually working on a bunch of guidance, and we'll be helping push that out through the Canadian Home Builders Association, the Urban Development Institute, that's specific to some of the Bill 44 changes around multiplexes. But generally, we are also working in our planning teams to better understand how the provincial bill changes impact development within certain areas within municipal governments too. So starting to better incorporate all of the transit-oriented areas changes, as well as where some of the anticipated multiplex growth will actually be within the system. But like this was unanticipated change for us too. So we're also just in the midst of figuring out the impacts to hydro as well. But we really understand the importance of connecting new housing in that in a short time frame too, and helping alleviate the housing crisis as well too.
And just one other question through you, Chair. You'd mentioned incentive programs, and I'm assuming that on your website they're very easy to find for people, and it's just on the BC Hydro website. Is that correct?
Yeah, I should note though the solar and battery offer that was mentioned is currently under development, so it is not on there yet. But all of our current offers for things like heat pumps, insulation, and things are really quite easy to find on the website. And when we do have new offers, we can also, again, work through some of our peer networks with local government staff to help supply some of that information too, so you can help communicate it to your residents as well. Likewise, with that optional residential time of use rate when it's launched in June, we're going to be creating some resources for local governments to figure out how you can, again, help us to advertise that to your residents as well.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite, and over to you, Councillor Smart.
Well, thank you. Through you, Chair, to Ms. Webb. I just wanted to know specifically in Oak Bay then, if we're looking at optimistically to build about 650 housing units over the next 5 years gradually, is this a concern for BC Hydro from a capacity point of view, those kind of numbers in Oak Bay?
Not from any of the maps that I've seen, and you will see that invitation I mentioned earlier for council to come and attend a session with our executives. Is we are actually going to be talking about our planned capital projects in the region too, so you can see, where we'll be building new electrical infrastructure like new substations and feeders. But to my knowledge, not any of them are located directly within Oak Bay. But I'll also let Ted speak to this one as well too.
There's no substation planned for Oak Bay or anything like that. The substation is probably somewhere in the western community somewhere as we're looking to look at a site and discuss something there.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to whoever can best answer this at BC Hydro. We have both in BC and other provinces in Canada with climate change had severe experiences of emergency conditions caused by whether it be fires or ice storms or windstorms. And so I'm wondering if you can briefly tell us what BC Hydro is doing to mitigate the impacts of that on the service to the customers.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great question. Ted, do you want to kick it off and I'll fill in?
Yeah, sure. That's the area I unfortunately deal a lot more with is responding to storm events. We know through climate change, unfortunately, that we're going to get more storms and they're going to be more intense. So it's something we prepare for, and we do a lot to encourage and working with, I know it was called the NBC, but it's Emergency Management and Climate Change, I believe now, working with them to making sure that the public is prepared as well in dealing with these challenges. In the interior, they have the fires and floods. Certainly we have windstorms, increase the storm activity here and flooding in some areas, and knock on wood, hopefully a minimal fire amount. But we work to harden our system. We know living on the West Coast, we're never going to eliminate outages completely. It's sort of just the deal of living on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. We're going to get these big storms that are going to come rolling in and cause some damage to our system. It's a very hardy system, but we hope to do is lessen the impact on our customers, whether that's through the frequency of storms or the duration. So we've hardened the system in a lot of ways where we're able to isolate where an outage is happening to make it a smaller, less impactful event, and also in situations it allows us to restore power a lot quicker as well. And part of it too is information. Everybody wants information. We know the outage is going to be 12 hours. It's not going to change anything by calling us many times. But we hope to do is making sure that the customers have the right information so they can make the right choices for themselves. If 12 hours is something that is suitable for them, then they can withstand that. If 12 hours is too long, they have to make other arrangements. Or if it could be 2 days for an outage, if there's severe damage, it's something we have to deal with for that. But it's not just storm and climate change issues. It's also, as we know, living in the Cascadia zone, that we have to prepare not if a big one happens, but when it happens, and make sure we're all prepared for that eventuality.
Mm-hmm. And just like many local governments, BC Hydro, we have our own climate change adaptation strategy that includes, just a plethora of different actions. One of them being like working with the Canadian Standards Association to continually upgrade the criteria for snow loading on power lines, for instance, is just one of the various types of initiatives. We're doing fire smarting principles around all of our major electrical facilities, but also we're looking at the role that battery storage will provide in the future too, in helping us through some of these increased climate events. So yeah, it's sort of widespread across the organization, looking at how we can better prepare for those events. We're also just on sort of a side note, working with some local governments to provide data on the reliability of the electrical system broken down by municipality too. So that's something that we'll be able to share with you in the coming months too, just so that you can see the average number of interruptions in a year and the average duration of those, because I'm really happy to say that we have quite a high reliability standing among electrical utilities across the country, but especially in urban areas in BC, we really don't experience too many of those long duration outages that Ted was talking about too.
If I could add, sorry, do you mind if yeah, unfortunately for the urban areas, they don't experience the outages that you would experience in the more rural areas. I mean, we have more trees in BC, we have more trees per kilometer of utility line than any place in North America. And on Vancouver Island, we have 3 times that amount. So what brings us here can be the bane of hydro's existence. We have more trees per kilometer utility line than any place else. It's just a reminder, though, for all of us to be prepared. 2 hours, 3 hours in a heat wave can be just as hard as 12 hours in Oak Bay can be just as hard as 12 hours in a rural area when you don't have the same resources or same outlets. So it's very important for us to monitor reliability and making sure we know if it's a senior center on a line, when we're doing outages, when we're doing the work, when we're restoring power, we know what's on the end of that line. And especially after COVID, if it's taught us anything, it's when you went into the store, there was I didn't find any sticky note on the store that when there was food with my name on it, someone was saving it for me. It's a reminder that you have to be prepared before the event, not during the event.
Thank you. If there's no other speakers, I do have a couple of very quick final questions. And one is just with respect to the time of day rate that will be coming in. Just a question to whoever has the answer here. Will customers get that automatically if they consume the power at the right time, or do they actually have to sign up specifically for the new rate structure?
Yeah, they are going to have to specifically sign up for it. So we'll be doing a whole lot of education in the coming months about the benefits of signing up for the optional rate structure. And again, who stands to benefit the most? So EV users who have, high electricity use profiles. We've done a bunch of modeling, could save about $200 per year if they're willing to do things like charging their EV overnight outside of those peak times. But yeah, it will be something that that our customers will have to opt into. So look forward to hearing a lot more about this in the coming weeks.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Webb, you mentioned an invitation to council, mayor and councillor, our municipality, others to an event. And I am sorry if that had already come to us. I'd missed it. If you could just remind me again, please, when that is and what it is exactly.
Sure, there's 2 events. One is working with staff at an operational level. That'll be in the morning, I believe it's June 10th. And then we've invited elected officials from the CRD and the CAO as well to attend an event in the afternoon with our Chief Executive Officer, Chris O'Reilly, and Maureen Daschuk to give an overview of what's going on in the CRD.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all our visiting delegates for the information they've brought to us to share with us and the community. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Yeah, thanks again for having us.
So moving ahead now to item 5 on our agenda, our mayor and council verbal reports. And just before we start that, I note that it has been 2 months since our last opportunity to share this information at the Committee of the Whole. And so your lists, councillors and mayor, may be long. So I just ask that you all be as succinct as possible to keep up our momentum here. So I'd like to start this maybe starting, well, let's put him in the hot seat. Let's start from my right, and Mayor Murdoch will be the first speaker. And we'll move along this way, and I'll be the last to go. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. I think and I do have a chance to speak to activities on a weekly basis, so I won't take up much of this time. I think the only thing that is probably of 2 things of interest. One, I was able to attend, along with staff, a provincial update on childcare programs. So as we're struggling to find staff and the community is struggling to find effective childcare in the community and across the region, it was a good update in terms of some of the programs and things that they're bringing to the table. No short-term solutions, but hopefully some longer-term and medium-term ones. And certainly, I should just say I appreciate the commitment that the province has to finding solutions, which has not always been the case. And the second is just, as all members here know, but just want to express our appreciation. The Chinese Benevolent Association, the museum that's newly formed in the last couple of years in Chinatown in Fantan Alley, hosted all of council for a tour, and I just we're partners with the CCBA through the partnership at the Harling Point Chinese Cemetery, which is a National Historic Site. And so there was a great learning opportunity for everybody. I just want to express my thanks to Charlene Thornton Joe, who hosted us, and all the volunteers that that help make that cultural piece which is so key to our history, and all the work that they do. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Next is Councillor Appleton, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll endeavor to be brief. Just both in April and May, attending meetings of the Heritage Foundation, and just there's much anticipation, I guess, planning underway for the Heritage Foundation to have a presence at the Oak Bay Night Market. So that's something that the foundation puts a great deal of effort into every year and fields a lot of questions. So if you want to make contact with the foundation, that's a good place to do it, starting next month. And also the Heritage Foundation has issued their annual report for this year, which has been distributed to council. And that's always a highlight, always really, really nicely put together and with really good content and visually powerful as always. From the library perspective, I continue obviously chairing the monthly meetings. This past a couple of weeks ago, or on May the 11th, I was pleased to attend and open and make remarks at the Emerging Local Authors event on May the 11th. And this is the annual showcase of exactly that, emerging local authors that have the opportunity to have their locally produced work showcased at the library and are made available through the library's branches for people to get exposed to those locally and privately produced and independently published titles. So I encourage all council to check those out. There is a huge diversity of interesting stuff out there this year. And just on behalf of the GVPL, I would just like council to be informed and to acknowledge in this venue the passing of Mr. John Gowdy. Mr. Gowdy was a longtime councillor for the district of the city of Langford, and for 12 years, and served on the Greater Victoria Public Library Board both as a councillor, as elected councillor, and as a citizen representative for Langford. And the first branch of the GVPL in Langford is named for him, the Gowdy branch. So he in these last past couple of weeks passed away. So I just wanted to acknowledge his passing and his significant contributions both to public service and to the GVPL. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. And now Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you very much. I'll keep mine very, very brief because I know that the mayor has spoken about a few of them. There was one, I attended a CRD course on inclusion, literacy, and board readiness, which was excellent. And I would highly recommend councillors who weren't able to attend to go and listen to the recording of that course. It was very, very good. I was at a Block Watch luncheon, which introduced the new head of our local Block Watch, and we had a song He's Dinner. I think the mayor might have talked about that before. I also attended the opening of the lawn bowling, which was really a lot of fun, and the Kiwanis Henderson Park reopening, and the ceremony for the new tree that was planted on Beach Drive, which was donated by a wonderful couple from right here in the community. And the mayor already talked about the tour of the museum, etc. Don't forget, Oak Bay Tea Party is May 31st to June 2nd. And also the Royal McPherson Theatre Society EGM happened a couple of weeks ago. And my colleagues who sit around that table saw fit to ask me to be president of the society. So I'm now president of the society for the Royal McPherson Theatre Society. Thank you.
Congratulations, Councillor Braithwaite. What a great opportunity for you, and what a great person for the role. And now over to you, Councillor Smart.
Yeah, thank you. In addition to my role meeting with Camosun as council liaison, I attended regular meetings for the Arts Commission. Also attended the conference with many of you for the Association for Vancouver Island Coastal Communities. Enjoyed KOB's talk on dementia-friendly communities. Attended the dinner with Songhees. I also participated in the TC 10K with a lot of the community. That was really fun. Attended the housing in Carnarvon Park open houses with everyone here. I also attended a UDI panel on regional transportation, where there was updates on the rapid transit network. And I enjoyed racing in the Commuter Bike Challenge. I was challenged by City of Victoria Councillor Matt Dell to race my bike against his Evo car. And I won by 6 minutes, but that does not sway my enthusiasm for our community being served by more car share options. Also attended and hosted events for Design Victoria, a 4-day festival that celebrated the vibrant design economy and change making in the community. And I think everyone's mentioned the other things, so I'll let someone else speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I will also try to be brief because many of the events have been mentioned that we all attended, so I'll try and cover things that haven't been. May 5th, I participated in the Red Dress Walk that was coordinated by the Songhees Nation, Esquimalt Nation, Victoria Native Friendship Centre, Indigenous Perspectives Society, and the Island Métis Family and Community Services Society. So that was a march from Hallowell Road to Maple Bank Road, and it was very well attended. And from there, I came back to Oak Bay and attended the Camas Day put on by the Friends of Upland Park, always a popular event, and despite the rather inclement weather we had that day, it was a good turnout, and I think that everybody enjoyed the music, all the booths that were set up, and certainly the tours of Uplands Park. On May 9th, I attended the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Steering Committee meeting. And at that meeting, we, of course, finished the final planning for tomorrow's reception, where we, as a committee, host all of the resource agency members to come together, share information on regional initiatives or things that are happening that we should be aware of. And joining us this year for the first time will be representatives from the new Indigenous Justice Council that has been set up on Yates Street. So we're looking forward to that. And then May 15th, I attended the Crest Board and AGM meeting, and of course gave the financial presentations as the chair of the Finance Committee. And that concludes my remarks.
Thank you very much. And I'll just say a few things. Where have got my notes here? Yeah. So I've had over the last couple of months, my usual attendance at standing committees and commissions that I'm appointed to, and I've had many helpful conversations with community members. I'm just going to shorten my remarks only by mentioning the special opportunities I've had really for the first time to represent the community as acting mayor when the mayor has not been available. And I just want to say it's truly a privilege to go out there wearing in that role to meet people across Greater Victoria and learn about their lives and the organizations and causes they support. And I really had a lovely time and some great fun. The first of these assignments was to attend Destination Victoria's 50th anniversary celebration down at the Laurel Point, which was a great crowd and some really fortuitous encounters I had in conversations that him informed me in my work here. The second event was to attend Persian New Year celebration Nowruz, and my husband was also invited as a guest. So that's their New Year is the first day of spring, and they held a fabulous event at the Scottish Community Centre. There was really a beautiful ceremony, music, dance, food, cultural teaching. And I think I learned from a member there who I did know that probably the entire Persian community in Victoria was gathered that evening, as well as many other special guests. I also was called in as a pinch hitter to attend the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce's AGM, which was the formal business of the organization, but also a very skillfully moderated panel discussion on harm reduction, street homelessness, and its impact on prosperity and at least perceived safety in downtown Victoria, a very, very complex subject, and with expert speakers that covered different aspects of that from mental health, housing, and the business community perspective. More recently, just on May 7th, I was at the Hallmark Heritage Society 50th Annual Awards Ceremony at Wentworth Villa. As you can imagine, a fabulous selection of both heritage conservation areas and specific buildings that were, and their architects and designers and communities that were recognized for their efforts. And then finally, this last Sunday, it was sunny and it wasn't windy. I was really, it was really fun to welcome the inaugural Island Cricket Club tennis cricket tournament who were playing at our Windsor Park. There were 6 teams assembled, and I have to tell you, they were thrilled to have access to Windsor Park, to the field there to enjoy and promote their sport, which took them 2 years in the planning. So it was a really appreciative crowd, and they had a lot of fun. So that is everything from me. Thank you. Now we move on to item 6 on our agenda, which is the public comment and question period. Before I say any more about that, I just want to identify anybody in the room who would like to make comments at this time. I don't see anybody online. So is there anybody yes, okay, I see one speaker. So I will just do the drill here, although I know that you know the drill, but I will repeat it for the record. So this is an opportunity for members of the public to address council regarding topics that directly impact the community of Oak Bay. So when you come up, please, to just state your name and municipality of residence and the topic of your remarks. Keep your remarks brief and speak for no more than 3 minutes. So please come forward.
I turned it on, see? I think that's the first time. Anyway, I'm Andrea Careless, and I'm with the Oak Bay Climate Force, but I also want to stress that I worked for the Climate Change and Air Quality Branch in the Ministry of Environment for 25 years, so I know a little bit, and been around policy. So I just wanted to respond to some of the comments that Fortis has made, Fortis BC. First of all, just with respect to natural gas in general, installing gas locks in emissions for the lifetime of the building, and also future retrofits, which must go electric, will be expensive. And the bottom line is, excuse me, we don't need any kind of gas in buildings anymore. And moreover, the latest research has found that it's a significant health hazard, especially for children. Now I want to get into RNG, renewable natural gas. We do need to use RNG for industries that aren't able to electrify yet, such as the concrete and steel industries and long-haul trucking. So, there's definitely a need for it. And just to quote Fortis says that currently about 1% of gas used in BC is RNG. There aren't 2 gas lines going to a house, so customers who have chosen to do the right thing and pay more for RNG are getting mostly fracked gas, but they don't know it. Fortis estimates that it will only be able to generate about 15% of the total current gas demands with RNG by 2030.
Excuse me, Ms. Karras, could I just stop for a second?
Yeah.
I see the corporate administrator's hand raised. It's corporate officer, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that per the council procedure bylaw, we don't accept comment on delegations at a committee of the whole.
Oh,
Sorry, my bad. I
Okay.
thank you for letting me know that, Ms. Plouffe. And I will actually then ask you to conclude. You've got time to provide other remarks if you'd like, but you may not
Yeah.
respond to the
that
delegation.
wasn't fair. Okay. Anyway, I do want to point out that Fortis BC was allowed to speak in the public participation period, which I've already told you about. So okay, I don't have much more to say anyway. So it won't be until 2050 that most of its gas will be RNG. As people shift to electricity due to available financial rebates, lower operating costs, and people's desire to lower greenhouse gas emissions, there will be fewer gas customers, which means rates will increase. There's a limited number of landfills, large farms, wastewater treatment facilities, and wastewood sources.
Ms. Careless, we...
Didn't you say I could continue?
Not on that topic, not responding to the delegation. If you had something else in your time as a public speaker you'd like to say, you're welcome to give us those
Okay.
remarks, and I'd give you an extra minute now. I could reset the clock. But as Ms. Plouffe has identified,
Okay.
you can't
I'll-
speak to the delegation.
I will send this to you. But I would like to say, I'm just going to be a pain in the butt for you guys tonight. That's not clear either. So two things are now not clear. Public participation, I think that means to me at Oak Bay Council, certainly business people from Oak Bay and certainly people who are community members, definitely not industry who have chances to do delegations, submit consultation briefs, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned last time, we didn't know that Fortis BC was coming because it was just in the public participation period, so we didn't show up. And we would have liked to hear them, and we'd also like to have responded. And similarly with this, and that was in.
Thank
so
you.
the
Ms.
information-
Careless, if I just might speak for a second. We have had both Fortis and BC Hydro here tonight as official delegations. That's under a
Yeah.
separate portion and set of rules of our procedural bylaw. We have had in the past a member of the public come to speak to us who just happens to also be work for Fortis BC, but that is actually wearing a separate hat and in a separate role. So
okay.
that is an important distinction, that we invite members of the public and they can come and
Okay.
speak to us about those things as members of the public.
So that's helpful. So if someone comes from Fortis or BC Hydro, I don't really care.
I wonder.
Can they say that they're from that? Or should they just say they're a member of the community and they have concerns about that, that they don't want to associate themselves?
I might just turn to Ms. Plouffe, and she can just give us, if this can be brief, a clarification on this so that it is on the record.
Thanks.
And if there's further questions, we'll probably take it offline after the meeting. Thank you. Go ahead.
If you can just repeat the specific question that you have, thank you.
Me? So, okay, my
Yeah,
question.
so no, I just wanted
you
you,
want to
if you
do it?
could clarify the rules around delegations, just succinctly if you can, just so that Ms. Careless understands. And if that's going to take too much time, we can actually do this offline after the meeting.
I don't know if I'm being totally out of order, but not rules about delegations, but rules about who can talk in public participation periods. And if it is industry, someone who's in industry, can they talk as an individual? And if so, do they just say they're not part of Fortis, or how does that work? Because it's supposed to be the public. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Ms. Plouffe.
Thank you, Chair. Public participation, is anybody in the public who would like to present? If you want to present as the organization, that's when you would book a delegation.
Okay. So it was just confusing the last time because the person, Carmen LeBlanc, who was presenting, said she was with Fortis BC. And then I'll just ask you later about not being able to talk to delegations because we weren't aware of that either. And I don't know if I read it wrong or whatever. Anyway, thank you. Sorry.
Well,
to
thank
take
you
your
for
time.
coming, and I hope we've clarified some things. I don't see anybody else online, and I wouldn't know if they were on the phone. I assume there's nobody on the phone, Mr. Dowling? No, okay, thank you. And so with that, we'll conclude this portion of the meeting. And moving forward. So now we're at item 7, corporate reporting documents, and this agenda item is subject to public input. I should introduce it by saying we have just one tonight, highly anticipated staff report coming from our Department of Engineering and Public Works. I believe staff will be making a presentation, and I just like to acknowledge before they begin that this report that we are receiving is a byproduct of a significant amount of work by our staff and also a large cadre of skilled professionals from across the engineering subdisciplines. And so I just wanted to note that we were very fortunate to be able to draw on this professional expertise to provide this critical information and analysis to council and the community tonight. So as I said, this item is subject to public input. Procedurally, we'll have our presentation, followed by any questions from council, and then there will be an opportunity from anyone in the public gallery, in person or online, to also ask questions. So welcome, Mr. Mura, our Manager of Engineering, Infrastructure, Analysis and Planning, and Mr. Robertson, our Director of Engineering and Public Works. You have the floor and our rapt attention.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for a chance to present tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank all of the Engineering Public Works team for their part in informing the report and through all the work they do daily on behalf of the district. And also just to recognize Mr. Rennick, who's the Deputy Director of Engineering and Public Works, who's been part of collaborating on this as well. The focus on today's presentation is the infrastructure that is all around us in the district of Oak Bay. For the most part, it's out of sight and out of mind, and along with the parts that we can see, is pretty much taken for granted. We celebrate centenaries and other such significant milestones as a community, but the unspoken reality is that it also means that our infrastructure is also aging and hitting those same milestones, and as a result is showing signs of distress. The information that we are presenting today is the most comprehensive report card that has been developed about the state of our infrastructure. It is built on various master plans and recent condition assessments done by our consultants, and it is also supported by staff observations through their maintenance programs and having to deal with emergency situations such as leaks, collapses, backups, flooding, not pestilence, but everything else, just short of that. It's also reflective of industry best practices and standards. Much of what you have read in our report or will hear about tonight is based on tangible observations from live examination, from CCTV data, that as we put cameras through mains, from testing and other observation methods. We also rely on modeling that provides recommendations about capacity and resilience of our systems that are underground and out of sight. So going to the next slide, there we go. So tonight we're going to go through talking about the useful life of municipal infrastructure and some scary pictures. We're going to talk about the findings and recommendations from the assessments and staff observations, overview of the risks to the municipal infrastructure, our methodology of prioritizing capital projects, and the state of the infrastructure report card and next steps. The first part of this is part of a two-part mini-series to council, which will focus on part one, outlining our key findings and concerns for municipal infrastructure and the application of engineering standards specifications. So what we use to evaluate, what tools we use, and an overview of risks and decision-making, prioritization, methodologies, and overall infrastructure scoring. In the fall, winter this year, we'll be presenting the second part of our report, which will identify solutions or proposed solutions, financial analysis, budgetary recommendations, discussion about staffing and operational considerations. This slide shows the steps that we've gone through, where we are tonight, and the future. Up to this point, we've been working with water, sewer, and storm drain master plans. Storm drain is still not complete, as we've had issues with evaluating all the mains due to roots and not being able to get cameras through, and working with our consultants to finalize, but we have a good portion of it. It's also based on recent condition assessments for sidewalk and curbs, pavement and streetlights that were completed just recently. And also based on input from Public Works and their reports about the type of issues that they deal with on a daily basis, whether it's during the regular day as they're part of their duties, or whether it's call-outs in the evening or on weekends. We've collated and examined all these facets to determine the ratings, and we're in the middle box there, we're presenting our findings tonight. And then future steps will be identifying the risk models and funding scenarios, and different models for the rate of approach, how to deal with the deficiencies. And we're presenting it, as I mentioned, in the fall. So we have still a large body of work to do between that now and that time. And I'm going to turn the presentation now over to Mr. Mamura, who will walk through the details of the presentation, then I'll wrap up with the last couple of slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed, for setting the stage for our presentation today, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Excited to guide you through the rest of the presentation. I'd like to first start by discussing useful life, typical useful life. This is a definition that was first identified in the Sustainable Infrastructure Replacement Plan in 2021. And typical useful life of infrastructure varies and is dependent on physical characteristics, soil conditions, how well the asset is being maintained, and design and construction practices of the day. The next two slides will illustrate some common issues that are found within the district systems. Tuberculation within the water system is a common issue that results in rust formation inside of the pipe. This process accumulates over time, and if not well managed, can have performance issues. This includes reduced flow and pressure loss due to the constriction of flow through the pipe. On the second picture, you'll see corrosion. Corrosion in a pipe is essentially the gradual wearing away or the deterioration of pipe material due to chemical reactions with its surroundings. Over time, the pipe can become weaker, can develop holes, or even completely fail, which can lead to leaks and breaks. So fractures and cracking, this can result from a combination of factors. This includes age, defects, and external forces on the pipe. If not fixed, this can cause collapse and cause flooding or sewer backups. And then the second photo there is of root intrusion. This occurs when tree roots grow into the pipes as roots are drawn to sources of water and nutrients, such as small cracks or joints in a pipe where they want to find a home. And as shown, roots can cause blockages and result in flooding or sewer backups. So on this slide, I've outlined a concern level matrix. Staff have used the following color-coded matrix to categorize findings and issues. These concern levels will be used throughout this presentation. I'll be presenting a series of slides for each infrastructure type, starting with key takeaways, key findings, and some figures depicting the age, the material, and the size of each of our systems. I'll be starting with the water system first, and you'll notice on this slide here, we've got a report card 1 star out of 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. So when you see those stars, that's the indication there. So the district has approximately 100 kilometers of water mains, and approximately 40% of the system we've considered as being high priority. So I'd like to highlight the highest concerns related to the district's water system. These include having a single source of water from the Capital Regional District's transmission main, main number 3 at Foul Bay Road and Lansdowne Road. Currently, there is no emergency supply of water if the CRD main number 3 gets damaged or is put out of service. Most of the water flows through a pressure-reducing valve station at this location, and that is in poor condition and has structural as well as mechanical concerns. We also have a significant portion of the water that flows through a 500 millimeter diameter steel main on Lansdowne Road that was constructed in the 1950s. And This steel main is prone to corrosion, leaks, and breaks just due to its age. Another area of concern within the water system is that 19 kilometers of the system is 4 inches smaller. This is further impacted by tuberculation, which we've shown on one of those pictures of issues. It results in some of those mains that would typically be 4 inches down to 2 inches. So in some cases, so there's an impact on capacity there. Another aspect of the 4-inch mains is that hydrants are not able to be installed on these smaller diameter mains, which results in firefighters having to connect to hydrants which are further away on adjacent streets. And larger mains within the system may still not be sized appropriately based on modeling results that we've received. This impacts how much water is available at hydrants during a fire event or the ability to accommodate new development. So staff are actively working on addressing these issues, including the work being done on the new North Oak Bay pressure zone, being proposed to address those condition concerns of the aging pressure reducing valve station, improving some operational efficiencies, and simplifying the supply to the northern portion of the system. And one point there is that the 17% or 19 kilometers of mains are asbestos cement. These mains have deterioration issues and are past their useful life, and those are mains that we're working to get out of our system as well. And then just on the rest of the slide, you can see concerns related to the water system, lower and medium concerns. I'll be commenting on some of these in the next few slides. So the district's water system, like all of us, is aging. The average age of the water system is 69 years old. And while older mains are more prone to leakage and breakage, the newer ductile irons in the system from the 1980s have been experiencing increased breaks as well. The district's water system primarily consists of cast iron, ductile iron, and asbestos cement mains. AC mains can become spongy and soft over time, whereas cast iron mains can become brittle due to graphitic corrosion and are susceptible to tuberculation. The main point here is that mains of differing materials can have different failure modes. 16% of the water system are mains that are 100 millimeters or 4-inch or smaller. Engineering minimum standards dictate that new water mains should be 200 millimeters, and there's some minor exceptions within cul-de-sacs just related to if they have available fire flow at those hydrants in those cul-de-sacs. Moving on to sanitary sewer infrastructure, the district has approximately 100 kilometers of sewer mains, and upon review of the age, the material, and the size, approximately 70% of the system is considered high priority. So the majority of the sewer system is separated. It's where the sewer is separate from the storm main, with the exception of 2 catchments, Humber and Rutland. Ongoing work as part of the upland sewer separation. Capital project is addressing the Humber catchment, and phase 2 of the project would encompass the Rutland catchment. The sewer system also has AC mains, which have deterioration issues and are past their useful life. And many mains are located in easements in back or side yards, and some are located under homes or on properties that are not in registered easements. This creates an issue for staff as they need to maintain them, and they can be more costly just due to their proximity to homes. Inflow and infiltration is a challenge that staff are working to address. This is where rain, which would typically or normally flow into a storm system, flows into the sanitary system during rainfall events. This is an issue as it could indicate cracked infrastructure or cross connections in the system, and this reduces the downstream capacity of the CRD treatment plant downstream to treat sewage. 33 kilometers of sewer mains are 100 years or older, with the average age being 75 years old. Many mains are past or nearing the end of their useful life, and these older mains are more prone to failure and collapse. The sewer system is primarily consisting of vitrified clay, asbestos cement, and PVC. Staff implement cured-in-place trenchless lining technologies to extend the life of the pipe. However, not all pipes are suitable to be lined, but trenchless technologies, whenever possible, are explored as a step in planning for rehabilitation. The sewer system has approximately 18 kilometers of mains that are 150 millimeters or smaller. New main upgrades are recommended to be a minimum of 200 millimeters. Moving on to stormwater infrastructure, the district has approximately 140 kilometers of stormwater mains, and upon staff's review, approximately 40% of the system is considered high priority. So stormwater flows through mains to 37 different outfalls across the district. The district has outfalls, some of them which are not deep enough. I want to highlight this point because it creates an issue for replacement of mains that are further up in the system, that are further away from the outfalls. The existing depth at the end of the system creates an issue for replacement of storm mains, and localized flooding is not always easily addressed or solved. Staff are working on capital projects such as the work plan for Estevan to address this issue. Storm mains are commonly located on both sides of the street. This is not a typical design or installation practice, and this is the result of ditches being on both sides of the road and storm pipe being installed in these ditch alignments. This adds cost to capital projects to remove or decommission multiple mains before a new single main in the middle of the road. And an example of this work is the work that's been being planned for Meadow this year. An added layer of complexity here is that those storm mains are also commonly located under large boulevard trees where those ditch alignments were filled in. As shown earlier, root intrusion is a common and significant maintenance problem that staff encounter to clear those blockages just to prevent that localized flooding. So older stormwater mains are more vulnerable to failure, which could lead to the increased risk of flooding. The average age of the system is 72 years old, with 27% or 35 kilometers of the mains being installed 100 years ago. Mains within the stormwater system primarily consist of vitrified clay, PVC, and concrete. Vitrified clay mains are vulnerable to root intrusion. Just coming back to some of those photos that we saw earlier. 16 kilometers of mains within the stormwater system are 150 millimeters or smaller. What that means is that these smaller pipes are more vulnerable to flooding issues, and new mains for stormwater are recommended to be a minimum of 250 millimeters. Moving on to surface infrastructure. Staff have undertaken various assessments to analyze the condition of the district's surface infrastructure. This includes a pavement management plan, a sidewalk condition and curb assessment, and a streetlight condition assessment report. Some key findings related to the surface infrastructure include 162 poles, streetlight poles, that are in very poor condition. And we have 74 trip hazards within the sidewalk network that have been identified within that condition assessment. Within the roads assessment, 35 kilometers of the roads were identified as being in poor or very poor condition. And staff are working through addressing these issues through the sidewalk replacement program and the streetlight replacement program as identified in that 2024-2028 financial plan. The district has about 100 kilometers of road infrastructure, which consists of arterial, collector, local, and special roads. Poor condition roads create safety hazards, vehicle damage, and reduce the useful life of the road. The district has about 112 kilometers of sidewalk, primarily consisting of concrete slabs. Of important note is that 8,942 slabs were affected by scaling. This was the most common defect that was picked up within the analysis. And scaling is defined as the general loss of aggregate on the concrete surface. If not addressed, it can lead to further deterioration of the sidewalk network. Moving on to streetlights. So the district has 65% of poles that were identified as very poor or poor condition. These create a risk to public and property around the poles if they collapse. These poles were evaluated on the basis of the surface rust, the thickness of the pole using ultrasonic testing, the condition of those anchor bolts, and the corrosion of the base plates where the pole is secured to the ground. So moving on to engineering standards, specifications, and best practices, staff rely on best practices, guidelines, and standards to make decisions related to design and construction of infrastructure. These documents are invaluable. They help ensure that projects are cost effective and follow all applicable standards. It can sometimes be a daunting task to make sure that all standards are being met and considered, but ultimately they are important to ensure that designs and methods are consistent in practice. For example, the Fire Underwriters Survey specifies hydrant types, installation methods, and spacing requirements, whereas the AWWA standards published by the American Waterworks Association provides guidance on pipe materials related to the water distribution system. So municipal infrastructure is obviously the backbone of our communities, providing essential services. However, several risks threaten the reliability and sustainability of the infrastructure. These include natural disasters to operational and design hazards, such as inadequate data or lack of redundancy of infrastructure. A detailed risk assessment, which Ed highlighted earlier, will be implemented for each infrastructure type in the fall, and some of these hazards and risks will be evaluated as part of that. So staff prioritize infrastructure projects based on master plans and condition assessments, but also include the maintenance history of the asset, the material, local demand, or customer experience that the asset needs to provide. And I've just highlighted here on this slide just the differences, some of the different things that we look at between underground infrastructure and surface infrastructure. So on this slide, I wanted to highlight that staff realize and recognize that this is not a perfect science. We are not perfect, and we do our best to make decisions related to infrastructure based on many factors, including the risks, master plans, best practices, and legislative requirements. I actually had the privilege of representing Oak Bay at the Canadian Benchmarking Conference about a month ago, where municipalities can learn and leverage information from each other. And I wanted to highlight that nobody has come up with the perfect solution and the perfect program, whether it's the City of Toronto, Vancouver, or Saskatchewan. We're all in this together, working on the same things. So not a perfect science, and lots of things to consider. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Ed to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierce. This looks like one of my report cards from high school, the earlier years of high school. Rating, as Pierce has mentioned, is a really challenging thing, as there's many features that go into each class of infrastructure. It's not as simple as just looking at pipe and saying, well, it's old pipe, and so we have so much of it, and we'll give it a rating. Ratings are based on the criticality of each type of infrastructure, the severity of the issues identified, the overall impact of failures, and volume issues, capacity of the pipes that we're dealing with for underground. For instance, the water system is critical, I think everybody would agree. And pipe that is very old, as per standards, tell us that we have a problem with a lot of old pipe. However, the impact of a main break, on most streets can be localized, and the impact is relatively minor, of course, unless you're the one that lives on one of the houses that's out of water for a few hours, but it's relatively localized. But in the same water system, as Pierce has mentioned out in the high priority, mentioned earlier in the high priority, if we lose the PRV station or the 500 millimeter trunk main, the impact would be to all users and would be significant, and having to mitigate that would be extremely difficult. So we have both ends of the scale. So as we've looked at how we rate it, we try and take all those things into account, and not, when we first looked at it, it was like, everything's terrible. But then looking at, well, what can we live with? So we can live with having the expertise and the tools to do repairs when a main breaks. So although it's important, and we have a lot of kilometers that are very old or are asbestos cement or are 4-inch or smaller, we can do things to manage that through time to its replacement. We don't have that same comfort level when it comes to some of the more critical things. So we've tried to be careful with how we apply our rating to those across each type. As noted earlier, this is not a risk analysis. This is just overall score of its condition, and the risk analysis will come later. And it is an imperfect science. And obviously, this only relates to existing infrastructure, not things that may be installed in the future. And on the last slide, just to wrap up, again, just a reminder that we'll be presenting that detailed risk analysis in the fall, and we'll be presenting the council with options. If we were to take a model for replacing the small diameter mains, we can do it in 10 years, and this would be the cost and the sort of impact. Whereas if we moved it out to 15 or 20 years, but giving those types of scenarios, and also then talking about what the risk is to those models as we move further out. And then that will relate to what's, for staffing, what we could pull off in an enhanced program, and just the ability to conduct that much work in each year. It's a challenge given contractors and consultants being available to us. And as BC Hydro mentioned earlier, the difficulty in attracting technical staff is a challenge. But those are things that we are committed to continue to work on. The work that the previous Director of Engineering and Public Works did in talking about the infrastructure and receiving approval for increased capital budgets and staffing was the real groundwork for this. And at this point, we have much more information with the different condition assessments that we have on hand and just the additional staff to be able to analyze this. So we're getting a much clearer picture now, and I think it's the most accurate representation we have, snapshot of where the infrastructure is at today. And we look forward to presenting that to you in the fall. So with that, I'll conclude our presentation and open to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Barmura, and Mr. Rennick, who's sitting there quietly by, but was clearly heavily involved in all this work. So thank you. I will start a speakers list. I'm sure there will be questions from Mayor and Council. So Councillor Smart, then Braithwaite, then Patterson. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through you. Questions. What a comfort in knowing and seeing this report. Thank you so much for sharing it. My questions are mostly related to whether or not things will be included in this second phase coming up. So the first one I guess I have is I really appreciated obviously the mention of climate change, but I didn't specifically see a mention of sea level rise. And I know that some residents have expressed concern to me around storm drain outlets and sea level rise and potentially flooding neighborhoods. Is that something that's a concern or that would be included potentially in the next round?
Yes, please go ahead to whoever's going to answer.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Council. It was touched on that one of the issues in the storm drain system is the relative shallowness of some of the outlets. We have two large pump stations in the district. One of them is called Orchard Pump Station. It's next to the marina. And the other one is called St. Patrick Pump Station at McNeil Bay. These stations have to pump in the winter during king tide. And as sea level rise continues to be an issue, that means those pump stations will have to pump more often. And it also has the possibility that we might require a third pump station. So sea level rise is absolutely a hazard that faces our storm drain network and needs to be incorporated in our discussion about risks.
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. That was really helpful. My next question was just with regards to, through you, Chair, to staff, with regards to the Complete Streets policy and whether or not at the next stage, understanding this is mostly about risks and larger issues, I just wanted to know with regards to things like adding street trees, unpaving, cycling infrastructure, curb cuts, things like that. Is that Complete Streets outlook going to be part of this, or is the phase 2 really about prioritizing risk?
Through the chair, this is really about prioritizing risks. That work would be something that, as we're looking at, for projects looking at how we rehabilitate surface infrastructure, what we might build into those in the future.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff. And my other question was just with regards to coordination of some of these things, and this may be the same answer that you had around the Complete Streets policy, but with regards to BC Hydro and street poles or BC Transit and bus stops and how these things interact with, again, is this more project related and something that we wouldn't expect to be addressing in this risk analysis?
Through the chair, yes, yeah, that wouldn't be part of this analysis, but would be more on a project basis.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to staff, just a final question, I guess, I was curious if staff was looking for direction from council tonight with regards to priorities, or is that really, again, something that would come in phase two, obviously acknowledging that this is their expertise, but were they looking for input as to any of this in prioritization tonight?
Through the chair, no, we're happy to get feedback, but that would be more of a second step to, I guess, as we give you our risk analysis of each issue and the cost to deal with it, that's probably going to be a good point to talk about how we prioritize.
Thank you, Councillor Smart. Over to you, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thanks so much, Chair, and through you. Thank you, I think. I think, Mr. Robertson, your comment in the very beginning where you said showing signs of distress could be the understatement of the century. When I look at this and I look at the little stars at the end, and I'm like, I'm thinking, okay, there's 30 possible stars and we only got 14 or 12 out of 30. That's 40%. That is not good, right? So I'm a little taken aback. Well, I'm not really. I mean, honestly, I knew we were in bad shape, but it's just to see it in actual black and white is a little bit hard. Number one, I didn't realize that we replaced the green lamp standards. I thought BC Hydro replaced those. So I was really surprised that that actually comes out of our coffers. Is that correct?
Is that a question to staff?
Yes.
Through you, Chair, there are essentially two kinds of streetlights in Oak Bay. We have what are called the lease lights, which are just a metal pole on a BC Hydro pole. And then there are the streetlight poles. So that's the ones in the uplands, the black ones on Oak Bay Avenue, and the green ones that you primarily see in the Downs and North Henderson. Those are our assets. They do belong to us, and they are our responsibility to replace.
Thank you. Yeah, wow, that's crazy. I think what I'm worried about is when we get phase 2 of this report coming out in the fall, I'm worried about what's going to happen between now and the fall, because we have had a lot of instances in the last, even in the last 4 months of water main breaks, etc., in certain areas. And is there any way to predict where we might think the next one might happen, or is it just a case of whack-a-mole and we're just doing something in one spot and then it comes up in another spot? And yeah,
I would be a rich man if I could pull that off. No, it isn't anything that we can really predict. So we deal with having the materials on hand, staff trained to be able to handle it. And so, yeah, we have to be reactive in this for the water system. For the sewer and drain system, we are actively using our new tool, the SLRAT, to do fast evaluations, acoustic ones, and also CCTV and a more aggressive root cutting program. And that'll be part of the range of options that we come with, because obviously, you know, we can't fast track replacing 40 kilometers of sewer main, but we may come with an option of enhanced maintenance to say, if we did 6 months more of root cutting in a year through a contractor or through adding another vehicle and staff, we could keep up with that and keep the mains flowing and be on top of that as we get into a program. And I'd just like to point out one other thing about streetlights, which is kind of worse news. This evaluation, these numbers didn't include the upland streetlights because we already knew that those systems needed to be. So the percentages and numbers you're seeing are on everything except for uplands.
And if I may, I would just like to follow on to what Director Robertson said with respect to the water main breaks. The delegation from BC Hydro made a comment that there will always be power outages on the island and that they are doing their best to keep them localized and short. And unfortunately, there will always be water main breaks. A metric that water utilities track is how many breaks per year per 100 kilometers. You could also look at things of how many service disruptions did you have that were longer than 3 hours, et cetera. And so the focus for us is not, can we prevent a water main break from ever happening in Oak Bay? It's, can we prioritize those major pieces of infrastructure that affect a lot of people? And can we have appropriate tools and training and staffing so that when there is a break on a road like a Bartlett or a Roslyn, can it be brief and have minimal impact on those residents?
Thank you, and I would say that I think our team does a really good job of mitigating those whenever I've seen them. So I have two more questions. Number one, how do you get rid of rust from tuberculation? Do you have to put it and when you get rid of the rust, does it then cause corrosion in a pipe?
So there's a process called pigging where you send through a bullet that's specially made that scours off. The problem is if you don't do lining of some sort after that, you're exposing more metal which will further corrode and quickly. But that we are exploring, and we have, Oak Bay in the past has done some lining afterwards, but that's really the effective way to deal with it. It does, even right now without pigging, we are having issues with when we're doing our water main flushing, it's taking sometimes 3-4 times longer than it should to flush a main because we're getting so much debris and discoloration. So to have to run that until we get the color out is a problem.
Thank you. And then my last question, in the report, and I think I think somebody touched on this. It was about on table 3. It talks about the water system is supplied from one source of the CRD transmission main, and then the recommendation is that we work with the District of Saanich and the City of Victoria to establish connections for redundant water supply. And I was kind of not really sure what exactly that meant.
Through you, Chair. So Capital Regional District has a number of supply mains that provide water to all of their customers. There is a supply main called supply main number 3 that runs along Lansdowne Road to the intersection of Lansdowne and Foul Bay, and then it turns to the north to head to the Tuolumne Reservoir. We only have one connection to it because that's the only point that it comes to Oak Bay. If there were to be an emergency, a seismic event, something that causes supply main number 3 to be shut down, even for the short term, Oak Bay does not currently have a contingency plan. However, we are exploring partnering with City of Victoria or District of Saanich and looking at possibilities that our system could be temporarily connected to theirs. City of Victoria, for example, has, I think they get water from 3 different supply mains, 1, 2, and 3. So if there were to be something that affects supply main number 3, well, City of Victoria has the other 2. Aside from that, we are also in dialogue with Capital Regional District all the time about what are you guys doing? What are your plans? Because as far as Oak Bay and our 18,000 residents are concerned, supply main number 3 is a critical piece of infrastructure, and it absolutely has to keep working. And Pierce and Deputy Director Mamura and I saw a fascinating presentation a couple weeks ago at the CRD Water Quality Symposium about repairs that they made to one of their supply mains in North Saanich, and they kept it running, and it was incredible. So nothing but respect for what those folks do in CRD Regional Water Supply.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Patterson. Any other hands after that? It's okay. Mayor Appleton. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our Director of Engineering for introducing this, and our Deputy Director, or Acting Deputy Director, Mr. Mamura, for having the courage, being the newest one with us, to present all of this good news story to us. But yeah, it's I don't think it's really it's surprising to those of us who have been at this table for a while, or even on the other side of the table for a while, it just seems like it's taking many years to coordinate the information required. But I'll start off with hopefully an easy question on this, because Mr. Robertson did make reference to there are many different scales that you can use to determine how you're going to present the standards. And I guess when I looked at this, the first thing that I thought of is, why did they use a Likert scale for this? So I'm just wondering what the rationalization was for using the Likert scale on this.
Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. The scale there was just used we're just trying to assess on a 5-point scale, essentially, from very low concern to a high concern. One of the things that we try to talk about in the report is identifying risk versus concern. So where risk typically takes into consideration consequence and likelihood of failure, the report just speaks to just our concern level within it. So it was just a way of prioritizing and categorizing our findings, not necessarily to speak to the risk, which we would move forward into in phase 2.
Yes, thanks so much. That's helpful information, Chair, to have, because I do think of the Likert scale as being very subjective and not very objective, and I tend to think of asset management as quite objective. The other question I was going to ask, and this, I think Councillor Braithwaite touched on it a little bit, because we talked about certainly within the presentation, a major contributing factor being the age of the assets within the district. But I am also wanting some input on how much of the problem is caused by accelerated deterioration or inadequate repairs or replacement caused by poor preventative maintenance, or what is a low level of service. I guess because council, we say at every budget outset that council determines the levels of service. I think with asset management, it's a difficult thing for a council to set a level of service when there's so many unknowns. And so I'm just wondering, as we try to resolve working our way through this asset management program, how do we at the same time as a council ensure that the future looks better from a preventative maintenance stand?
Through the chair, I'll take this, and then I'll let Steve add a couple points to this. One of the things that we looked at from an asset management standpoint, if you move forward and looking at this, is benchmarks. One of the ways you can evaluate if your asset is doing well is to actually compare to other places. So when you're looking at number of breaks per 100 kilometers within the water system, you can get a feel for how is your water system performing compared to the city of Vancouver or Toronto. So you can kind of see relatively how much money are you spending, on emergency maintenance versus proactive maintenance, and that's something that's typically tracked. So we'd like to start doing that and moving, in maintenance programs moving forward, to give council a better understanding of what the level of service should be, what are we doing now, and where do we need to be relative to other municipalities or best practices.
And further on to what Mr. Mamora said, I just want to make it clear that there are certain types of maintenance activities that do not replace getting a new pipe. So we discussed the vitrified clay storm mains that have trees planted on top of them. We have the tools and the expertise to cut roots from the inside of that pipe. However, we only have so many people at Public Works who can provide that work. And so we prioritize to areas of known concern. But some of these pipes literally have to be root cut every 12 months. Some of them have to be root cut every 6 months. And so you come in, you cut the roots. Well, there's still a lot of cracks in the pipe because it's still a 100-year-old pipe that's mostly porous. And so part of the work that we're working on as a department is being able to define with our existing staff, with our existing resources, can we effectively root cut all of our pipes, or do we need either additional staff or a contract? As Director Robertson alluded to earlier, you know, what would it look like if we were to recommend to council, well, this is the number of kilometers of pipe you are able to root cut every year, and we think you ought to do more, and this is how much that would cost. Unfortunately, these are very complex problems, and we are really trying to wrap our heads around them on top of, you know, everything else that we do as the department. But it is, as you rightly note, council sets a service level. And some of these service levels are very difficult to define, but just because they're difficult to define doesn't mean we shouldn't define them. It just means it takes us a lot of work to do it.
I have to get my word in here as well. There was a consultant's report done, I believe is in 2021, and it talks about the state of our infrastructure and how we approach it. And it speaks to like the advances that we need to make in our capital programs to do replacement, to do lining, rehabilitation. But the point that the author made is that those are long-term objectives, and his recommendation, which is something we're working on to bring to council this fall or winter, is we're going to have to do more preventative maintenance work until the long-term fixes, we're able to put them in place. So it isn't a matter of like, well, just keep doing what you're doing and eventually the replacement will be there. But his recommendation and what we're looking at is what do we need to do better in the meantime to get the infrastructure to that point of replacement.
Thank you, Chair. If I may continue, thank you so much for trying to shed some light on what is actually, I know it's a lot to unpack and try to identify it in a brief meeting. Just a couple of questions, because you talked so much about the tree roots there. What are the impact on trees when you do fairly aggressive drain cleaning and removing of the roots, or if we go to installing new drainage systems? Because there are some fairly significant trees that have extensive root systems that go out into the roads too. Do we have any sort of a feel yet for how that may impact our tree canopy?
Through you, Chair, I have never known a street tree to die from having root cutting performed underneath that tree. It's certainly not my expertise, but if we were having a mass die-off of street trees in locations where we were root cutting, we would certainly have to involve parks in the discussion about how to do that in a more effective way. With respect to removing these pipes where they're underneath boulevard trees, we try to be as precise and surgical as possible, and that can add cost and complexity to the projects. There's also situations where if you can't get the pipe out of the ground and the pipe's not in the way of anything, you just leave it in the ground, which we refer to as abandoning. And there would often be situations where it's just not cost effective or worth the time or the effort to try to get the pipe out. You just leave it be and put a new pipe in the middle of the road.
Thank you so much for that information, and I'll try to wrap it up quickly. But I guess the part of this that is not included with this part of the phase, and that I'm hoping will come with the next, is valuations, and certainly the valuation of the capital requirement for each system and the value of that system proportional to the whole. But I noticed that in the report on page 39, there are several statements that talk about that we've just begun to prioritize the infrastructure and that it's still difficult to navigate a straightforward path. So I guess that and if I look at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and what their scorecard is for asset management, we are still at certainly at a policy and governance level, very early stages, maybe a little bit more advanced now with this report from an operational standpoint. But will we, in the next reporting, then get a better statement on how do we move forward from here? How do we move the whole thing forward? Just trying to understand where we're going in the next phase.
Through the chair, our goal is to be able to develop a 5-year capital plan that will knit together, and a rolling 5 years, that will knit together all these different analyses to be able to prioritize the replacement work that we need to do with the infrastructure, but also with the new infrastructure that we are asked to construct as well. So we're looking at the bike network. We're going to be presenting in June the sidewalk master plan and what that might be directing us to do as far as infill or other things like that. So we're trying to knit all those things together so that we have a 5-year plan that we can present to council each year that will represent, as Mr. Mamura has pointed out, our best look at prioritizing and giving council that information so you know where we're headed.
Just one follow-up to that, I guess, because Saanich has been, and there's many municipalities across Canada and certainly a few in BC, they've been doing a pretty good job of with some of this work and advancing their asset management. And so certainly they talk about levels of service representing service and cost trade-offs established in a flexible, rational, and transparent manner. That also, though, includes longer than 5-year planning. What would be the objective in going beyond the 5-year plan to a 10 or 15-year plan?
Through the chair, yes, I should have mentioned that is our long-term goal. Just getting to the 5 will be a task, but yeah, our objective is to have a much longer term plan that we is our goal. Obviously, things impact that along the way where we have unexpected issues that change our priority, but that's our goal, is to get to a much longer term planning process.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, thank you. And I just want to really thank the staff. I know that there has been a lot of work. I see, so much of the public works crews and contractors out on the street, and so I know that there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and it is, we're not nearly there yet, but we are definitely moving further along the line. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. I'll go next to Mayor Murdoch. You have the floor.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. It's nice not to go last all the time. It's kind of, for once, it's great. I just have a few very quick questions. Just for my clarification, I appreciate there's work, with this information and previous information, there's work prioritizing going on already, but not waiting until that fall report comes to start prioritizing. The key things there in terms of the redundancy and the water main at Lansdowne. Do we have any sense, and is there any, again, from a governance perspective, any support required from council to sort of the top priorities that have already been kind of identified? Maybe the big pictures in there. Is there anything we can be doing from a policy perspective or a support perspective to help facilitate the prioritization or the speed of those projects? Through your Chair.
Through you, Chair. I don't believe that we require any further policy direction from council. Part of addressing the Lansdowne main is enveloped in the North Oak Bay Pressure Zone project, which has already been in the approved capital plan. And conversations that we have with our partners in other governments when it is appropriate for council to weigh in on those, as you will next week with our District of Saanich agreement. We already feel comfortable and empowered to have those conversations and to bring council in at the appropriate time.
Great, thank you. My other more technical just question was, I'm not clear, there's mention there of no sort of backup power for things like water pumps or other pumping stations. I'm not clear on what the impact of that is. So if there's a power outage, what does it look like? What does it look like for water? What does it look like for sewer and stormwater? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Chair, it depends. So some of the water pump systems are required to have adequate pressure for firefighting. Some of them are required to have adequate domestic pressure at all. Sylvan Lane, for example, there's a very small pump station that pumps water up to those folks who live on Denison Road and maybe one other road. If there were to be a power outage impacting that pump, essentially there would be almost no water coming out of faucets to those homes. With respect to the sewer and the storm pumps, it's an inability to move sewage up to the trunk main, or in the case of the storm system, an inability to pump it out to sea. So there's different ways that we can mitigate these impacts. For example, a couple of years ago, we knew there was going to be a planned power outage that impacted the St. Patrick pump station. We actually brought in a generator, parked it on the street at McNeil Bay so that there was no interruption, because if there had been a big storm coming in, it would not have been acceptable for St. Patrick Pump Station not to work. And so it was identified that a lot of these facilities either don't have backup power or don't have the ability to easily be connected to a generator, and that's something that we are working on addressing that deficiency.
Thank you very much for that answer. My last two we had one piece of correspondence, and it talked to just some of the sort of the emotional and sort of personal impact of the problems of infrastructure, and I thought it was a good lens, and so I had two questions. One, when we're looking at the benchmarks and looking at those things, part of the public perception is often the localized problems, right? So I think we had a water main break. The residents are here saying, well, this is the third one in the 15 or 20 years I've lived on the street. So that perception of benchmarks is terrible, even though, community-wide that might be. So I'm just curious in that, as we're looking at some of the prioritization of replacement and these things, are we looking at it also from a sort of a regional or a localized basis? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. So we would be looking at things like customer experience as part of that. So whether that's water quality complaints, water pressure complaints, things like that are tracked and would be identified as part of all of the different benchmarks that we'd be looking at. So as an example, you could say like 5.2 complaints per 1,000 people for water pressure. So how does that match up? When you extrapolate the numbers. So that's something that we absolutely would be factoring in and looking at amongst all of the different benchmarks.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you just broadly to staff for this report. I think it reinforces what we knew intuitively in many ways, but probably a little bit more daunting than expected. My last question is much lighter in terms of importance. We're dealing with life and health safety priority pieces here, but I'm also just curious as we go through the discussion around particularly the sidewalks and road work. There are aspects of, just from a community cohesiveness and aesthetics perspective, of sort of consistency of sidewalk and curb and gutter design and so forth, that people see when they walk around and know it's open. In fact, it's quite different in different parts of Oak Bay. But it's just something to consider as we're doing that work, to kind of come up with a consistent. I'm curious, given the mixed nature of those sorts of things, if that's part of the sidewalk and pedestrian master plan that's coming back to kind of have those considerations, or is it just something off in the future, or nothing on our roadmap at all at this point? Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, in terms of the standardization of some of those kind of minor pieces like the design of curbs, the style of sidewalks, we are working on standardizing. We've adopted the Master Municipal Construction Document, or the MMCD, which Mr. Mamora referenced in his presentation. So the intent is that when we do new construction, as much as possible, we are trying to match standards because they're uniform, they're province-wide. There are places where it's not that easy. For example, uplands. It's hard to make things in the uplands fit the standards when you've got the big trees and you've got the underground infrastructure to deal with. But generally, what we're trying to do is meet the MMCD standard as much as possible.
Thank you. That was my last question, except that triggered one other to follow up then. So through you, Chair, I appreciate those MMCD standards, but I think there's range within those I'm talking really here primarily from an aesthetics and sort of, so it's a much later topic than the sort of the life and health safety questions. I was curious if that is something that I think from a policy perspective, I think there are things that we are, as a body, would like to turn our minds to and make sure that we're having some policy oversight of that. So through you, Chair.
Through the chair, that's certainly an avenue that is council's prerogative to direct, and that's something that we can make sure we get a lens on. For example, many crosswalk letdowns in Oak Bay have red bricks on either side of a crosswalk letdown. That's not something you'll find in a standard anywhere, but that's something that we have been doing when we put in new letdowns. We put in the red bricks because there's an assumption that, well, that's what these things look like in Oak Bay. And really part of all of the professionalization of the department should be having these things come forward and be published standards that are endorsed by council, as opposed to just being kind of, well, you can really get very deep in the weeds on this stuff very, very quickly. Getting into things of, why are some of our streetlight poles black and some of them are green, for example? So that could wildly get beyond the scope of this discussion.
Fair enough, and I appreciate that answer. Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Now I turn to Councillor Appleton.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you to staff. I'm so grateful for this discussion and just such a comprehensive discussion on on a range of topics. This is not easy, and I do want to just state from my side as well the amount of work that goes into producing something like this. I'm definitely very, very conscious of this, and so thank you very much. A couple of my questions have been addressed, and I guess I'll start with granular stuff and go maybe a little bit broader. But with respect to the notation about sanitary infrastructure that is over 100 years old. There's a significant amount that's over 100 years old. What is a portion of that addressed by Upland Sewer Separation Project?
Through the chair, not exactly. So the project that we're doing this year is putting in new storm sewer this year and next year. One of our follow-on commitments to Capital Regional District was that we will do lining of the sanitary sewer. Now, that doesn't make the pipes any newer, but it does extend their useful life.
Thanks very much for that. Just with respect to the, on a different topic, with respect to the sidewalk and pavement assessments that are in the report, they're not great, but maybe better than some of the other metrics. I'm just wondering whether or not, if you compare what the snapshot is at this point in time to maybe where we were 5+ years ago, it strikes me that there's been at least some progress made with some additional investments in infrastructure over that time. So we're definitely not where we want to be, but have we made some substantive progress over the last couple of years?
Through the chair, some of these reports, it was the first time they were ever done, so it's hard to compare, or it's the first time they've been done in a very long time. Pavement, however, in 2012-2013 timeframe, the district commissioned a pavement management study, and at that point in time, that study recommended that significant additional investment would need to be made in asphalt paving, even to maintain the condition of the asphalt as it was in 2012, which, to be clear, was not very good. And your predecessor councils responded to that report by increasing the amount that was spent on road rehabilitation to where it is today. And we can say, based on the updated pavement condition assessment, things looked better in 2023 than they did in 2012. So that work that yourselves and your predecessor councils did investing in road rehabilitation did show a result.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rennick. Just with specifically, I just wanted to comment on my appreciation here for the discussion talking about the balance between proactive and reactive maintenance. And I'm really conscious that staff in your position, obviously want to minimize the amount of reactive maintenance that you need to do, but while at the same time recognizing, as Mr. Rennick has commented, that reactive maintenance is always going to be a part of the nature of the system. So this balance, I think, for council in terms of the level of service discussion and the balance between those two things is really important. So I think that this discussion is really substantive, and I think is some of the most important part for me. And so very interested to see in the phase 2 report commentary on the balance between investments in increased maintenance and servicing of existing assets to prolong their life, investments in potentially, I'm hearing, training and equipment to react quicker to incidents and that sort of thing. And to be clear, I'm not talking about a tolerance for break fix, but rather how we establish that best balance. So I think this is, if this, and so this is what I'm hearing is going to be in the next phase report, which I think is super important. This is a bit of a higher level conceptual question, and staff can answer as they best see fit. But what it brings to mind for me is there a value, given what we have seen in the increase in prices of infrastructure and just how fast that's going up, and what I've heard from staff on a number of occasions is that some of the difficulty there is related to accessing contractors, accessing equipment, and this sort of thing. But a lot of folks are in the same boat as us as far as that type of thing, and I'm wondering whether or not the industry is gearing up to provide additional support for those types of things. So maybe this is not a reasonable question to ask, but maybe just a commentary from staff. Is there a balance to be struck between doing a certain period of proactive maintenance while anticipating a stabilization in costs for capital infrastructure investment?
Through the chair, one of the things that it's a great question, because one of the things that we've identified, and I think one of the council members identified, was the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card that was completed. I think industry in general kind of formulates their response to that. So if once they saw those the poor scores across the country, and they see the infrastructure deficit across the country, it's kind of a global indicator to say there needs to be money spent. There needs to be that gearing up of contractors and consultants, and you see it across even different consultants amalgamating together to service different industries. So municipal is becoming bigger and bigger. So I think there's a need there, and it was identified early on by that infrastructure replacement report card that Canada did. That would be my take on that.
I would also add that part of the work that we do to provide the best value to our residents is being strategic about our procurement, bundling projects together where it makes sense so that larger contractors are more interested in them, so we can take advantage of economies of scale, trying to time our procurement so we're not going out, on July 1st saying this job must be done by September 30th or else. So we do try and factor into the project planning. You look at an example like the Humber sewer separation. We had firms bid on that who have not bid on jobs in Oak Bay before, because we haven't had jobs of a size that that these firms are willing to bid on. And so we've had some good opportunities in the past of how can we design our projects so that they're attractive to industry, because more bidders, more competition, better prices is typically how we want it to go.
Thanks very much for that. One final question, Chair, if I may. I appreciated Mr. Mimura's comments about his attendance at the recent benchmarking conference. I think this is significant to me and I think to council, is because we recognize that the infrastructure, as Mr. Mimura has said, the infrastructure deficit piece is not endemic to Oak Bay. It's it's endemic across municipal governments. It's not specific to Oak Bay. And I appreciate Mr. Mimura's comments about comparisons and developing metrics based on what other jurisdictions are doing. I think in general that's something that council would really value. But I wanted to give the opportunity. He's spoken a little bit to it, but maybe offer the opportunity for Mr. Mimura to comment a little bit further on what his observations were from that conference, and anything else that stood out for his purposes that he thought might be relevant to Oak Bay.
Yeah, through the chair, I think one of the things that was discussed at the Canadian benchmarking was even new tools and technologies that were used that are being widely deployed across municipalities. So learning some of the just learning some of those tools that other places are using. But I think the largest discussion around benchmarking is about knowing what makes sense to track. Some indicators, some they call it key performance indicators, are more challenging to track and actually need like a database management system that a municipality is actively using, and a maintenance management program that can track that information. So it's even identifying some of the software pieces that are necessary to start tracking some of that that information that is being collected. So I think it's not just what are people collecting, but it's how are they collecting it, and that's something I could add as well.
If I may, in my previous work with another municipality, we were one of the founding members of the benchmarking initiative, and my manager was part of the forming committee. So it's been probably around 25 years it's been going, and having attended a number of them, another real benefit is just the papers that are delivered by other like-minded and like-positioned people in other municipalities across Canada. And it's not just the Vancouvers and Torontos, but it's the Saskatoons and smaller municipalities as well. So it's a great think tank. People are very open with their information and their experiences they've had of trying things. We are currently not a member. We were gifted an attendance because it was in Victoria this year, and we have certain connections to help us there. But our intent is to sign up and to start being involved probably in the water module first, and then into the sewer and the storm drain modules as well, because we see great benefit being able to be not just a guest attendee, but being a regular part of supplying data, but also receiving information and having this sort of annual time to learn from others and to share our experiences as well.
Sorry, Chair. Just one quick follow-up on that regard then. I appreciate Mr. Roberts' comments. From what I gathered from that, there's no further direction, there's no policy direction required from council in order to do that, because that sounds extremely valuable to me. So if no council direction is required, then that's fantastic. But if some council's direction is required, then I would love to pursue that.
We were just having a very quick discussion on whether or not that would require council direction. And the model for how we would fund joining the benchmarking initiative for the water utility most likely would come from the water utility charge to our customers. And so I think that likely council's opportunity to comment on that is when the next budget is presented for the water utility.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you. There may be some further questions from councillors. I see that it doesn't look like we have any members of the public waiting to ask questions, so maybe I'll just take an opportunity I have a few myself, just to follow on from some of the discussion we've had. So if you could just indulge me for a few minutes. And actually, I'd just like to follow up directly on this discussion on benchmarking, particularly after you've mentioned the Canadian infrastructure report, the state of the Canadian infrastructure. So in an environment like this, who actually then sets the benchmark if there are if there's lots of problems nationally and municipally? How do you find the measure that you want to set up to be measured against?
I'll take a first stab at it. Through all the information that there's a consultant group that runs the whole operation. So they have technical experts who get annual reports from each municipality that's part of the benchmarking, and from that then they come up with what the benchmarks are. And they're also looking at outliers, and there's a lot of statistical analysis that goes into that, and it changes every year. You're also, there was an interesting example at one conference where we were looking at the cost of cleaning catch basins, and the benchmark was at a certain level, and there was one municipality that was noticeably lower, like 2/3 lower. And so everybody assumed that the data was something wrong with the data there. And it turned out that they were doing a very simple operation of hiring two university summer students at a pickup truck and a post hole digger, and they were just by hand, they were cleaning out the catch basins. And their logic that they shared with everybody was, using a vacuum truck, you don't need to get 100% of the material out for it to be functional. If you got 80% out, it's going to work fine till the next summer. And we all listened and went, never thought of looking at it that way. So those type of things, you find where the outliers are, or they do, and come up with that averaging. And so we know then how we compare to all the municipalities that are doing similar functions.
Thank you. I also, this is in no particular order, but this is maybe a more just question of interest. Does every sidewalk have a curb? And if so, what's the distinction between curbs and sidewalks? They're grouped separately and reported on separately. So if you could just speak to that, please.
Through the chair, in Oak Bay, virtually every sidewalk has a curb, other than there's a few exceptions of what are called separated sidewalks where there's grass between the road and the sidewalk. Windsor, for example, has separated sidewalks. However, we have lots of curbs that do not have sidewalks associated with them. So the curb is just the raised concrete portion that defines the edge of the road and gives water somewhere to run along. So we have roads that have curb and sidewalk, curb only, no curb, no sidewalk. We run the gamut.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Rennick. Oh yes, I wanted to ask about cured in place liners and that application or use to. Is this just something that's done to extend life, or does it give enough substantial life that it's considered to be equivalent to replacement?
Through you, Chair. There's a number of different liners. Some are structural, so they are of sufficient thickness, typically fiberglass liners, although there are some PVC liners as well that are appropriate thickness that actually have strength to them. Other liners that the pipe itself, the host pipe, has to be structurally sound, and so it creates a impermeable barrier for roots, for exfiltration out of the pipe or infiltration into it. So there's a couple of different models. It's unknown really what the life expectancy is, because they are usually fiberglass resin, And PVC is known to have a very long life. So it could be that we get the same life again out of that pipe, or who knows what the end is. It's fairly new technology, in the last probably 30 years. So that end point isn't really known to this point.
And now if I could follow on, so I assume that sort of benchmarking analysis helps in understanding that too, because you're seeing what other municipalities are doing using the same approach. Would that be correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Thank you. I had another question about our storm sewers and sewers and the investment in that. And do we know the extent of the ratio of the hookups, the hookup rate in those parts of the community where we do have separated systems? You said that most of it's separated, so it is separated, but is it taken up by the community as a resource?
Through you, Chair, we are not aware outside of the uplands of any significant parts of town where people are not connected to both systems correctly the way that they should be.
Thank you. And then back to Mr. Robertson, you said in a kind of deflated way earlier that, about the street lamps and the traffic lights, that, things were not so good. But I just wondered, and this kind of follows up on Councillor Appleton's question, maybe about storm water and sewer separation. With the new lighting that we have now committed to and identified funding for the uplands, will that actually improve our record, our overall percentages, because of the number of poles that are included?
Through you, Chair, no, because it wasn't part of the assessment. We told the consultants, don't look at the uplands because we already know the condition and we already have it on our books to replace. So it will impact everything else, but no, sorry, it won't impact everything else. It's strictly unto its own.
I would add, though, we could have cooked the books a little bit. Every single one of those Humber Street lights is very poor, but they were not included in the total.
And I think, this is, and you may not be able to speak to this, but we had been talking about there's clearly interest and lots of work at your end on looking at this balance between preventive maintenance and emergency repair and finding a way forward to a point where we're kind of in some ideal state with replaced infrastructure and the right amount of preventive maintenance. Do we know at this point in time what that ratio is of preventive maintenance to emergency repair to start to begin calculating our future performance from, or is that something that we would need to be figuring out?
Through the chair, we do not have a current ratio right now, but it is something that is identified in benchmarking as a key metric. Municipalities across Canada do track that, and it's something that they build into their work order forms. So is it emergency maintenance? Was it a planned maintenance? Was it work that maybe was taken where crews were taken off of a planned maintenance activity and going to do a capital works project? So those percentages, I think there's about 9 or 10 categories of maintenance, and those are all identified across municipalities will report on that each year, and you'll see significant trends with, certain areas with colder climates, for example, have much higher emergency maintenance compared to proactive maintenance just due to freeze thaw, water main breaks, things like that. But as our current state, we do not have that yet.
We do have the ability to know what work were we doing in the middle of the night, what work were we doing on weekends. However, there's more to it than that, because the crew who's working in the middle of the night is just trying to restore service to the water main, to the residents, and get things going. And then the next day, a crew who should have been working on a capital project or should have been working on a planned piece of work now goes and finishes the repair that the emergency crew did. And so we're not accurately capturing that time right now. If Mr. Brozick were sitting here next to me, he would tell you that that's very significant. It's a significant impact on our operations, but we currently can't report out on that.
Sorry, just to add another deflation. When we talk about benchmarking and wanting to be part of this initiative, one of the struggles that we are currently engaged in, and we're working on a plan to improve, is we don't have a maintenance management system at Public Works. So we're working on developing. We've been working over the past 9 months or so in getting all the pieces in place, and it will tie into our asset management system. But the ability to accurately track the things that are going on currently isn't there. So we're working at building that capacity so that we have more accuracy. And also it will help us in planning scheduled maintenance, preventative maintenance, tracking the information of what the crews are seeing and their comments about when we need to do scheduled preventative work, having a database that we can accurately feed that information into and then generate monthly reports for crews to be able to go do the preventative is a huge part of an obstacle that we have to overcome here. So that's something we've been chipping away at, but it's still a ways away.
Thank you. It's so complex and multi-layered. Yeah, it's very, very evident in your presentations. Any second-time questioners? I see one hand. Please go ahead, Mayor Murdoch.
Thank you, and through you, Chair, I'll be brief. And actually, I'm happy to make the motion to receive the report because that's the only really piece of work we have to do today. Just a move in second. Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
So 3 very quick things. One, I'll just as regarding that kind of work that's been discussed by staff here in terms of building those databases and some of that sort of modeling and these things. I am curious, UVic didn't when I went there, but does now have a civil engineering program. And I'm curious if there's tie-ins we can have. We've moved from I think probably not a very attractive place to be doing civil engineering work to probably one that's quite compelling in terms of some of the work that we are tackling here. I'm curious if there's opportunities for partnership or for co-oping or for other ways of doing some of that kind of things, like thinking database development kind of work is often right in line with what a lot of the undergraduate or graduate student work might be. Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, we have been looking into that, and we're not at a point yet with getting our information prepared and how the records are being taken in. We hope to be there, I would say, within the next 6 months, because we have to be able to have those parts all in place. And then that is one possibility of looking, of getting something that's custom written that would be a stopgap to an asset management module, being able to undertake that. For instance, City of Victoria put in an asset management system, and then probably about 8 years later is now starting to implement the maintenance management module, which will be part of that. So we may do an interim step because the need is so great here, and that is one of the things we're looking at either some very basic software off the shelf or potentially having it custom written using co-op students.
Thank you. The other question I had, and I should have asked this in my first go around, really was if you look at the CRD's inflow and infiltration map of the region, we're very dark red for those pieces, no surprise. I'm curious if some of this work will give us a more accurate prediction of when we're able to start addressing some of the targets that have been set for the district in terms of reducing the I&I factors that are part of the regional requirements for the sewage treatment. Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, yes and no. Inflow and infiltration is an incredibly complex beast. Doing additional preventative maintenance, doing additional studies, getting more insight into how our system works absolutely will help us, but kind of the big ways you deal with inflow and infiltration are by replacing old leaky pipes and also by having people make changes on their private property. I wish I could say it was simpler than that, but unfortunately it's a very difficult problem to solve.
Thank you. And my last, just a comment. I appreciated the comments about the roads being better now than they were, but I think if you were to ask people what are the quality of roads in Oak Bay, and said that's a 3-star and our pipes are a 1-star, it'd probably give them a pretty clear visual impact of what is underneath those roads right now. Because I don't think anybody would rate those roads as terribly great, even with those improvements. So I love that Likert scale idea, in the sense that it gives you at least some proportionality of people saying, if you don't really know what our pipes are like, look at our roads, that's a 3, our pipes are a 1, just to give you some sense of urgency on this matter. So that feedback, I think, is actually quite helpful. Through you, Chair, I don't know.
Through you, Chair, thank you. And I would say that people's perception of our roads really depends on where they live. And it also does illustrate some of the complexities of us trying to choose a project. If you live in South Oak Bay and you drive on a road like Lafayette, for example, you might think this is the worst road I've ever seen. A prominent municipal politician once said to me it was like an experiment for how many potholes a road can have before it combusts. I don't think that's actually what happens to roads. But you look at a road like that and we would say, well, is there critical infrastructure underneath it that needs to be replaced? Do buses go on this road? Do lots of people drive on this road? And you ultimately come to the conclusion that it's frustrating to the folks who live on that road. But as Mr. Mamura showed in the presentation, all of those things that have to go into that funnel of how do you decide which roads to repave. On the flip side, if you live in the apartment buildings on Beach Drive across the street from the marina, you are currently enjoying a brand new, lovely paved road. I assume you all saw it when you were there for the tree ceremony. So people's perception on how bad the roads are really depend on what kind of road they live on and what kind of roads they drive on. So I just want to make that point clear.
Through you, Chair, thank you for that. And it's true. I also, though, think it's, and I really appreciate that overview, because it's a conversation I've had many times with many residents about why isn't the road just being paved, and it's important to understand we really can't repave your road if we're going to be doing the pipes in 3 years. That's just not money well spent, and everybody seems to understand that rationale. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. And before I call on Councillor Braithwaite, I would just add the comment that sometimes the residents don't want the roads repaved because they like them deteriorated, because it creates this country lane feel and slows traffic. So yes, it's very complicated. Councillor Braithwaite, you were next.
The reaction of our engineering department to that was classic. I wanted to talk, I forgot to ask this question before about, you talked a little bit about sidewalk scaling and explaining what sidewalk scaling was, which was when there was some bits of asphalt or whatever that were deteriorated or broken away. I know that we have a lot of areas in our municipality where we have plants growing out of the sidewalk. And our Parks Department is diligently trying to go around and deal with that by steaming them or whatever, which then will make them die, which then they will clump out, and which then will leave a hole, I would imagine, in the sidewalk, because the root system of the growth in the sidewalk is so large that it's going to leave some sort of a chunk out of there. So has that been taken into consideration with the scaling as well?
Through the chair, just to clarify, it's actually a Public Works program. We usually think of in the parks, but the removal or the steaming of them, we're working on developing that piece of equipment right now. Mr. Mamura, about?
Yeah, with regards to the defect itself, the engineering consultant that reviewed all of them, it took tripping hazards, holes, scaling, all the different types of defects into consideration, and identified them as either moderate or high or low severity. So all of those were considered as part of that condition assessment.
Anybody else before we move forward? Seeing no hands, we do have a motion on the floor right now. I thank the mayor for asking the question if staff needed any other further direction policy-wise at this moment. It sounds like the answer is no. So the motion to receive the report is on the floor and seconded. Do I have, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. And there was no members of the public, so no need to stop for public input at this moment. So I guess we'll just wrap this up by saying we are, of course, all looking forward to receiving report 2 of 2 in quarter 3 or 4. And thank you, again, we've all said it, we'll say it again, for your extreme amounts of hard work. It is complex, and it is good to have the information in front of council and the public, and to be able to talk about it, and to know better to know the devil. What's the expression? Better to know the devil you know than the devil you don't. So thank you again. So at this point, thank you, staff. You would be free to go if you wish. We have one more agenda item 8 is new business, and so I just turn to councillor. Is there any new business for tonight? Yes, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. At the willingness of Chair, I do have actually 3 notices of motion that I would love to read out for the minutes that would be considered at a future meeting. I have provided the wording to staff, but I would appreciate the opportunity to read them out to council if the Chair is willing.
Yes, that's fine. We're still within our time limit, so please go ahead, Councillor Smart.
Thank you. The first motion is with regards to the grant and aid process coming up soon. So the motion reads that staff bring back options to revise the information, material, and forms used for the grant and aid applications to include requests for additional information, such as, but not exclusive to, the following: alignment with council's strategic priorities, commitment to inclusion, equity, and diversity, appropriate compensation for artists and Indigenous elders, and addressing accessibility for events. And that the report be provided for council to review in time to allow for any directed changes to be included in the 2025 grant and aid application forms.
Thank you. Are you going to read them in all 3 in order? We could take them just one after the other here. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. The other 2 motions are motions with regards, notice of motion with regards to UBCM that support identical motions that are being considered by Saanich Council. So this first recommendation is with regards to Transit for Youth. Whereas the Get On Board program allows children aged 12 and under to ride all BC Transit and Translink transit services free of charge, and this program saves families money while offering youth low-carbon transportation that helps the province and municipalities reach emissions and transportation mode share targets. And whereas encouraging young people to use public transportation early in life can lead to lifelong habits of sustainable transportation use, and this in turn can have long-term benefits for cities in terms of reduced congestion, lower emissions, and increased social inclusion. Therefore, be it resolved that UBCM lobby the provincial government to expand the Get On Board program to include all youth up to the age of 18.
And the final motion?
Just a point of order, Chair. I think there's no need to read in all the whereases. Just for the record, it just has to be the motion itself.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure. So for this one, I can skip over the whereas. This one says, therefore, be it resolved that UBCM lobby the provincial government to make all public transit free for seniors aged 65 years and older.
Thank you. Does staff have what they need for the record there? You've got the motions. There was a pre-meeting consult, was there? Okay. Thank you for me. A point of clarification. So they've now been read in. There's no, they're just received, and then staff brings these back as motions at the next opportunity. All right. So thank you, Councillor Smart. Anything else? Any other business? No? Call for that motion. We got it from Councillor Braithwaite and a seconder. Thank you. We're adjourned.